Before we get into things though, I'll kind of just give a brief intro to what the plan is for today. So we're going to be live for about the next 30 to 35, 40 minutes or so. It's kind of a more laid back session. We're just talking data and I'm kind of looking to get some conversations started. If you have any questions, absolutely send them in the chat throughout the session. We'll get to them at the end. But it's basically going to be Rebecca and Jenica for the whole show. I'm Allison Rogers. I'm the editor of Collision Repair Magazine, and I typically am the host for this hour, but they have very important data to talk about today, and there's not much insight I can provide for it. They're the experts here for the AutoHouse Technologies 21 Canadian Benchmark Report. We publish it through Collision Repair Magazine, but we've seen like we've got some people in the chat here. People are tuning in, so I'll stop talking. I'll hand it over to Rebecca and Jenica. But before we get started, like I said, Q&A at the end. Feel free to put your questions in throughout. Mike will get to them at the very end. Without any further ado, Rebecca and Jenica, take it away. Tell us a little bit about the Canadian Benchmark Report and why it's so important to the industry. And let's delve into the data from last year.
Great. Thanks so much, Allison. So I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to join this webinar today. Up here is kind of the three topics that we're going to cover in this session, and we'll dig into each one of them as we go along. So first, obviously, we're going to be kind of doing a review of our 2021 Canadian Benchmark Report and provide some context around the numbers that we're seeing there. Then we're going to take a look at the trends and the impact of COVID-19. You know, where are we now on the road to recovery from that? Are we back to pre-COVID levels? And then finally, we're going to take a deeper dive into the 2021 benchmark data and unveil an opportunity for repairs to increase their performance and profitability, even with some of the challenges that we're facing in this current industry landscape.
Great. So as Rebecca mentioned, the first topic that we'll be covering today is a review of the 2021 Canadian Benchmark Report that we recently published through Collision Repair Magazine. And we hope to provide you with some context around the data points that were included within the report. So first of all, who are we? AutoHouse is a business intelligence software company. So essentially, we provide analytics and predictive reporting through our BI platform, Generis. We connect to all of the major body shop management systems, which is how we receive shops data, and a large portion of the Canadian claims go through our system. So to provide some context, the 2021 benchmark report sourced data from over 465,000 repairs, totaling over $1.3 billion in sales. I'll also mention that this data has been normalized. We do apply some variance thresholds in an effort to remove any outliers that might impact the integrity of the data. So in the report, we did a sales analysis across the 2021 Canadian market, first looking specifically at the average repair sale. When we include all payer types, the average RO sale was $2,852, which was just a 0.6% increase from 2020. Looking exclusively at customer pay, the average sale was $1,293, an increase of 0.4% from 2020. And then looking at non-customer pay, which is insurance pay, the average RO sale was $4,026, reflecting an increase of 3.4% from 2020. Now, for those first two categories, that average sale increase is fairly negligible. However, for insurance pay, 3.4% sale growth is more significant. So our assumption is that this rise is due to the constant advancement in the complexity of repairs across the industry. Looking further into average repair sales, we broke down the sale into 4 different components: labor, parts, sublet, and materials. We can see that labor comprised 45% of the sale mix, down just 0.1% from 2020. Parts accounted for 34% of the sale, down 0.2% from 2020. Sublet was 7.4% of the average sale, which was equal to that of 2020. And materials comprised 11.7% of the sale, reflecting an increase of 0.4% from 2020. So, looking at those percentages across the board, not much has changed from the previous year. We believe that the slight increase in the cost of materials across the industry accounts for that 0.4% in material sales growth, which is the most significant change that we see here. We also analyzed average gross profit percentage, and what we found is that there was basically no change from 2020 to 2021, with just a negligible decrease of 0.03%. Now, we understand that the impact of the pandemic has depressed industry net profits due to the decrease in work available. However, the direct costs associated with repairing vehicles hasn't changed substantially. Therefore, average gross profit has remained in line. When looking specifically at the Western provinces, we see that average gross profit decreased 2.1% from 2020. So essentially, they gave back the gains that they had made in the prior year in which GP had increased. And then the Eastern provinces, however, they increased their average GP in 2021 by 1.7%, and they appear to have broken out of their normal historical range. Now, when we look at gross profit broken down by different profit centers, we see that labor GP decreased by 1.3%, reflecting that the cost of labor is continuing to rise. And then parts GP increased by 1.9%. So those two changes are likely offsetting each other, leading to the negligible change in overall average GP percentage. And then sublet gross profit also decreased by 2.3%. However, as sublet only made out about 7% of the overall sales mix, this likely caused little overall effect.
So now we're going to look at our cycle time trends, and we calculate cycle time keys to keys. So that's from arrival date to delivery date. And we can see across the board that cycle time has actually remained fairly consistent from 2020 to 2021. So overall across Canada, we're at an average of 11.4 days. The West is slightly higher at 11.6, and the East slightly lower at 11.2. What's interesting, though, is to compare that against the top 10% of performers. They're performing at an average of 6.1 days. That's almost twice as fast as their peers are fixing the cars. So what is it that those top 10% are doing differently that's allowing them to achieve those numbers? So at the bottom, we're going to kind of look at a cycle time breakdown. So taking that arrive to start, we see that in orange, it's about 2.1 days. Their actual start to complete time of working on the vehicle is 9.1, and then their complete to delivered is just under a day. So really that 11.4 days is not all being spent working on the vehicle. Is there an opportunity to narrow down those 3 days there? And this is more of an admin thing. You know, once you get everything, all the parts and everything you need, usually that's not a problem to do to complete the repair in a timely fashion. So, you know, this again is more of an admin thing. Is there potentially an area to improve on the scheduling? And we're going to actually look in this a little bit more detail of the opportunity that there is here. So combined in with that, obviously related to cycle time is touch time. Now, one of the issues with using touch or cycle time is you can't compare large and small repairs. What's a good cycle time for a larger repair may not be a good cycle time for a really quick express repair. So we like to look at touch time because it kind of levels the playing field of different size repairs. And touch time is defined as the average number of hours produced per RO per day. So essentially it's total hours divided by the cycle time. Now, again, we're seeing the numbers relatively unchanged compared to 2020. Overall, we're at 2.8 hours per day. The West is slightly lower at 2.6. East is slightly higher at 2.9. So that's really keeping consistent with what we're seeing on the cycle time side. Again, looking at those top 10% of performers within the group, they're performing at an average of 4.2 hours per day. So again, how are they, you know, achieving those numbers? What are they doing differently? And as Jenica mentioned before, we do apply some filters and variance thresholds to our data set to remove any outliers that could impact the validity of this data. I think sometimes people see that 4 hours per day and think that that's unattainable. I know for a fact there are shops out there that are achieving that. So, you know, it's what can we do differently? What are they doing that we're not doing to increase that? And maybe you're not going to be at 4 hours per day, but, you know, small improvements over time to get there. Now at the bottom, we're actually going to break down the touch time by manufacturer origin. So we see the domestic and Asian is about 2.8 hours per day, where the European is lower at 2.5. And I think this can be attributed to usually being more parts delays for European vehicles.
Yeah, so switching gears a bit here, we also wanted to analyze the impact that COVID has had within the Canadian market. So in this graph here, we're looking at the average monthly sale trend nationwide from the beginning of 2020 to the end of 2021, broken down by quarter. The starting point on the graph shows the average monthly sales performance during Q1 of 2020. And then you can see a sharp drop off by Q2 of 2020 as soon as COVID hit. As you can see, at its lowest point, average monthly sales decreased as much as 40%. As we look along the trend line, we can see fluctuations that they seem to correlate with the level of whatever restrictions were in place at that time. We also examined how COVID impacted Western provinces versus Eastern provinces, as the levels of restrictions did vary between different regions. So this graph here displays the Western provinces sales trend, which seemed to fare a little bit better than the Eastern trend, with the lowest point on the graph reflecting a 34% drop in average sales. And here we see the sales trend in the Eastern provinces, where heavier COVID-related restrictions affected sales the most, with a decrease of 45% in Q2 of 2020. So finally, we put together a visual comparative of all three sales trends. Unfortunately, average monthly sales still haven't bounced back to where they were prior to COVID. However, they are trending up. So hopefully after a couple more quarters of data, we will see the average sale fully recover.
So now that we've reviewed the benchmark data, we're going to take a look at some opportunities to improve your performance and profitability. So as everyone on this call is aware, there's a lot of challenges right now. You know, the number one thing that I think we hear all the time is that there's parts delays. I can't fix the vehicles because I don't have the parts. I can't get the parts that we need. Another concern is staffing shortages. You know, people can't find techs or other staff, so they're kind of running short-staffed. And then finally, increased operating costs have put a lot of pressure on margins, and this is impacting all repairers. So you have to be better at what you're doing to make sure that you're making money. Now, these things are all kind of out of your control. So what can you do? It's more important than ever to control what you can and try to operate in the most efficient way possible. You really can't change the way things are right now. You can't change the field of play, but you can change your strategy for how you handle that. So we've analyze the underlying benchmark data that goes into those, and it highlights a couple of opportunities that you may want to consider. So as an industry, let's take a look at how we perform in different segments of repair sizes. So this graph here, we're going to see the dark blue makes up our express repairs. Those are under 10 hours, and they make up about 25% of the work. The light repairs from 10 to 20 hours make up about 33%. The medium repairs are 20 to 40 hours and are 30%. And the heavy repairs over 40 hours are about 12% of the work. So let's see how that translate into performance. So if we look at express, they're at an average touch time of 2.3. Light is at 2.7, and medium and heavy are both at 3 hours per day. So this is a pretty typical thing, as what we see is as the repair gets larger, the touch time improves. And the reason is if you lose a couple of days on a large repair, it's not a big deal. You have time to make up. But if you have a repair that's under 10 hours and it sits for a day or two without anyone working on it, you've already lost there. You can't make up that time. So the express repairs are really interesting here because they are the lowest performance here. They're average 7 hours with an average cycle time of almost 5 days. And usually these repairs are going to be drivable, so they're more able to be scheduled in for the repairs, and they have less parts. So there should be less parts related issues. So really, this is a really good opportunity to focus. Now, if we do focus on those express repairs and we improve our touch time in this segment, which is a quarter of our work, and typically what we see is between express and light repairs, those usually make up about half of your work. So if you can really dial in the smaller ones, it has a huge impact on your overall performance. So again, if we were to improve our touch time in that express segment, what would that mean? Well, it would mean an improved cycle time, and all the stakeholders are going to be happy with that. Definitely the policy holder is going to be happy, the insurance company is going to be happy, and everyone else involved. You're probably going to have improved CSI and NPS scores. Customers are going to be really happy that they had their vehicle back quickly. And really the most important is you're going to improve your profitability. So by processing these repairs more efficiently, you'll be able to put more work through the shop and therefore make more gross profit dollars. And when we kind of look back at the underlying data of the benchmark report, those top 10% of performers, they're already executing on this opportunity. So that being said, what do we need to know or do in order to raise our performance in that segment? So, we just kind of have a couple of things that maybe you want to think about and take away from this session. It's really important to understand and measure your performance by those different segments. Are you one of those people that, half or more than half of your work is in those small repairs? If you're not processing those efficiently right now, is there a specific SOP that we want to implement for those smaller repairs? And getting your whole team aligned on that goal. So there, an example could be that someone needs to alert someone within an hour of that car arriving on shop so that you can make sure that someone's got their hands on it right away. Maybe you have a goal that all repairs under 10 hours need to be delivered the next day that they come in. So there's just a bunch of different things that you can try out. Again, set the goals, set the targets for your team and get everyone engaged on that and working toward the same target. It's also important to know and measure your average daily output. What are you capable of getting out the door every day? And what is your optimal WIP number? If you have too much work on site, it's very difficult to be efficient. And I know right now everyone's WIP is quite high. It's just part of the parts delays and some of the other challenges there are. But knowing what your optimal WIP is and also what your WIP ratio is. So we calculate WIP based on your average daily output compared to what you have on site right now. So essentially, if you can get out 100 hours per day on average, you have 700 hours on site right now, your WIP ratio would be 7:1, meaning it would take you 7 days to get through that work that you have. So, again, we can't change the parts delays and things like that, other things that are out of your control, but you can do the best that you can within your environment. So, manage what you can, focus on that, and, hopefully get into that top 10% of the performers within this group. So, that being said, that's pretty much it for our presentation. If anyone's interested in learning a little bit more, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. If you're a shop that's connected with us, but maybe not using our tools to the full capability, let's connect and we can do a performance review of your shop's data together. Or if you're not connected at all, but just interested in learning a little bit more and seeing what value we could provide you, feel free to reach out to an introduction meeting. We're happy to do kind of a demonstration of how we approach this data and how we look at it to drive performance improvement to the shop. So that's, again, it for the presentation. So I guess we'll get on to the Q&A section. I'll pass this back to Mike and or Allison.
Yeah, I don't think, Allison, any requests for questions out there? By all means, guys, we're here.
Oh, we do have one from Craig Gilbert. I think this is more of a comment. He says the graph, however, was overall percent sales year over year in 2021. Was it better or flat for the full year? Perhaps you guys can get some more context out of that.
I'm just trying to understand the question here in 2 seconds.
Sorry, Craig.
Year over year versus 2021. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it was I think if you average the years, they were probably very similar. I think 2020 was probably a little bit worse than 2021 when you're breaking down by quarters. We do have a question here from Rod at Herbers. How is our performance data shared with other members in your network? No performance data is shared directly with anybody that a user would not authorize. So the only thing that we ask is we can use that data to benchmark. So that's how we build the 2021 benchmark report, is we have that authorization in our license agreement, but no specific shop data is shared with anyone without the shop's actually written authorization. So as many of you know, we work for some of the franchise networks or member networks in Canada, or some of the OEM manufacturers. If we were to share a shop's data with either one of those, that would be a named entity in our license agreement. So our perspective on data, the shop owns the data. They tell us who they would like to share it with, which stakeholder, and there doesn't have to be a data share either. If the shop's licensing us just for their own purposes, there's no data share whatsoever. So it is a named entity, and you have to authorize the data share.
Great, thanks for
So I hope that answers that one, Rod.
Perfect. We've got another one in the comments here, I think, for you, Mike.
Denis, okay, what's considered east and west? So east is essentially Ontario East. So Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic provinces. West is Manitoba West, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC.
Cool. Denise says, thank you. We've got one from David Ribeiro in here. Can you plug shops sharing data in their crown provinces to help expand provincial database results?
Plug shop sharing data in their crown provinces. Yeah, we could potentially build benchmarks by specific provinces if we had a data set that would not allow anybody to reverse engineer that. So we never do it within a group or an entity where somebody could potentially reverse engineer the data.
And then Grant is saying, insurance carriers are hearing paint materials are increasing, but your data says otherwise.
In the average, I think Jenica, maybe if you want to comment on that, the one slide that was up there, there was a increase of the paint material cost in the average sale, I believe.
I believe it was 1.9% increase. I could go back and take a look if we're interested, but.
Yeah, I think there was an increase shown there for the materials side of the average RO, and you do have to kind of consider that the average paint materials RO is, or paint materials percentage of the RO is approximately 10 or 11% generally. Mm-hmm. So even an increase of 5% on that 10% isn't going to show a substantial amount in the overall RO.
Your Grant saying here it was a 0.4% increase from what he saw, but you can download the report as well. AutoHouse's Canadian benchmark report is available on their website too, if you want to look back on any of the data that we discussed here today. Also got a question from Calvin here as well. How confident are you with your data? 4-hour touch time seems high given today's parts situation.
Very confident.
And then we've got another question from Rod here. Are the touch and cycle KPIs separable by drivable and non-drivable?
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Rebecca. I'm talking too much.
No, we can. So we have some filtering options that we can separate them out by drive and non-drive within our reporting.
Gotcha. And Dana, to answer your question, yes, this presentation is being recorded today. So tomorrow in the Collision Repair Daily Easy, and there will be a recording available. We'll also blast it all over our socials, so you'll be able to see it and share it with your team.
Do we get any kind of residuals on that, Dana, or not?
All righty. We've also got another question from Craig down here. Do you have a line of sight with the expected year-over-year BCI or market growth for 2022? Dana says not a chance, Mike.
Year-over-year BCI. Sorry,
Yeah, I'll repeat that. Sorry. It says, Craig's just asking, do you have a line of sight with the expected year-over-year BCI or market growth for this year, 2022?
Can I get the acronym BCI? Just
Sorry, BCI, Craig. I'm market growth.
market growth. Okay. When we put together the COVID, I was hoping to put Q1 of 2022 in there, but since it was so close to the end of Q1 when we put that graph together, a lot of the ROs hadn't been closed yet. There's usually a bit of a lag. I think we're getting closer to back to normal situation. You know, even just from kind of conversations with the shops, a lot of them I think are back closer to normal than was shown in the final of the Q4 for 2021. I think we're getting close right now. And just on my travels recently, the traffic's starting to pick up. I know in the Lower Mainland here in Vancouver, I would say we're back to pretty much pre-pandemic traffic. And Toronto, I think, is a little bit different. I've been downtown Toronto a few times lately, and not quite as much traffic downtown Toronto, but I think it's starting to ramp back up. If you guys are interested, we'll see if we can put something together, maybe mid-year or Q3 or something, and see if we can update those stats to actually do another measure.
For sure. Yeah, I think it was the Q4 2021 data said about 20% down in terms of overall sales. So we're just based on, I don't have the data to back it up, but based on what Mike's saying too, from the shops that I've spoken to, at least in Ontario, it seems that things are slowly getting back up. I mean, we're obviously dealing with all the situations we spoke about here, but eventually things are, opening up again. So if anyone else has any questions, now's your last chance to get them in. But I just want to say a thank you to the AutoHouse team for giving all of this data to Collision Repair Magazine to share with our audience. We very much appreciate it. And I'm sure our audience is very thrilled to have this as well. So thank you so much for speaking today. And if anyone else has any more questions that you don't have a chance to get across in the live chat here, feel free to reach out to the email on the screen. AutoHouse is more than happy to answer all your questions. And like I said, you can download the report. It's available on their website, and take a look at it yourself. Alrighty, so thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, thanks, Allison.
Great.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Take
bye,
care.
everyone.
Thanks.